is going to be devoted to connectivity. We've heard about it. It has come into all of the other conversations as an underpinning technology. And in particular, we're going to talk about 5G deployment along infrastructure routes, along transport paths or corridors, as the key enabling factor of the automated driving experience. The deployment of 5G corridors across Europe has been supported by the European Union, specifically the Connecting Europe facility. So we're going to hear a bit about that. We're going to hear about the key achievements and lessons learned under the 5G cross-border trial projects funded under Horizon 2020. So many funding instruments to get through, as with all of our panels. But I'm actually going to hand over the floor to the man from DG Connect, who's been the brain box behind this whole session, has set it up to tell you a little bit more about why we're focusing on this today. So, Christian Miga, Senior Policy Officer, Directorate General for Communications, Networks, Contacts and Technology, DG Connect, in the European Commission. Tell us what it's all about, Christian.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I'm very pleased to give a short introduction to this fourth plenary session of the EUCAD2023. Our main topic is about digital connectivity infrastructure as a key enabler for connected and automated mobility, including CCAM, and for the building of the broader mobility ecosystem. The pan-European deployment of 5G connectivity infrastructure with uninterrupted provision of service along transport paths and across the borders is a priority that is common to both EU policies in the field of mobility and digital. Talking about cross borders, I'm sure you all have experience whenever crossing a border of service, a loss of signal and service interruption when crossing the border with a time to get the next mobile network for handover ranging between 30 seconds to several minutes. Of course, from a smartphone, this is certainly an inconvenience as an experience, but for connected and automated mobility and for the purpose of road safety, this is, of course, not acceptable. Solutions to bring this time for handovers to below 100 milliseconds exist. They have been defined, developed, tested and validated as part of 5G cross-border trial project with the support of the European Union, and they will be progressively implemented as part of the deployment of 5G corridors with, again, the support of the European Union, in particular on the cross-border section of corridors. So in order to report on progress achieved and reflect on the way forward, we have with us 5 eminent speakers, senior experts and executives from the industry and from ADEA, the European Executive Agency in charge of implementing the Safe Digital Program. But I'll stop here and I pass the floor back to our moderator, Jennifer. Enjoy your session.
Thank you, Christian, and thank you for all the hard work organizing this session. As Christian mentioned, we're going to take a slightly different approach. We will have a panel discussion, but first we're going to hear from experienced people about what have been the successes so far and what about the calls for the future. So please welcome on stage Edwin Fischer, co-chair of the 5G4CAM, Connected and Automated Mobility Working Group at Deutsche Telekom, to tell us about those achievements that I mentioned that have been learned so far. Thank you.
I'm not going to report something around the key results and lessons learned from Horizon 2020 5G cross-border corridors, namely from the ICT18 call, ICT53 call, but also beyond. There's more stuff in the pipeline. What looks a bit like a barcode is meant to be the session we are running now. So I don't know what happened here, but let's see. Okay, just to set the scene, past and ongoing research and innovation projects related to cross-border 5G for CAM. You can see it on a map. You can see the ICT18 calls, which have been finished in 2022, 5G Krakow, 5G CAM, and 5G Mobix. And we have ICT53 call projects, which are still ongoing, namely 5G Blueprint, 5G Med, 5G Routes. And there are also related projects, Vital 5G, 5G Rail, Target X, and many more to come. And you can see a rough location here on the map where the regions are marked, or the corridor sections are marked, which have been covered by these projects. Not all of the corridors, of course. We were concentrating mainly on the border sections for the very reason to address the issues Kristen has kindly raised. It's like we need to address the interruption. We need to come to a seamless, as close as possible, and seamless service experience. And here we go. Key results from the ICT18 call projects. Today's baseline is really 4G LTE networks. And we have also some varying rollouts of 5G new radio being added to 5G networks. And this has been known as 5G non-standalone. All you currently more or less experience in terms of 5G is called 5G non-standalone, which builds upon 4G networks. But 4G is the new GSM network in that regard, so it's pretty widespread already across Europe. And as a matter of fact, the phase-out or sunset of 2G and or 3G networks has already started across Europe. So 4G will be the new baseline in that regard. So that is what we had and what we took as a baseline for these projects. But cross-border connectivity and its behavior is pretty much based on standard roaming, and it is cumbersome and it's really inefficient. Meaning you have the outages, you have the interruptions, you have to endure more or less service interruptions like a dropped voice call you can personally experience, but also in case of CAM, if we talk about, say, HD map updates, for example, you cannot wait for minutes or so in that regard. So it's really important to overcome that solution. What the projects implemented, based on 5G NSA mainly on the corridors, led to significant improvements to cross-border service continuity and also addressing service latency, and we really managed to create impact in that regard. So just to label and name a few key achievements in that card, shortest and even no communication interruption. It's like down from tens of seconds to just a few seconds in the worst case, up to seamless handover, depending on the implementation. Not all projects did exactly the same, but we have managed to have 5G non-standalone seamless handover, at least in one of the 3 projects in that regard. The others have managed to trim down the service interruption significantly. It's now deterministically interrupted, meaning you reselect the new network on purpose and not by coincidence in that regard. That's a big advancement in that regard. But also low latency through edge clouds and mobile edge computing in the visited network. That means like the service logic sitting behind the network is moving into the network and it stays in the network. Because you might recall how roaming works. Roaming is always like that. All the traffic typically goes back to your home network, whatever the home network is in that regard. And that can be pretty cumbersome, thinking about, say, in the CAM use case, a vehicle equipped with a SIM card being hosted in Spain, for example, and this vehicle being a recreational vehicle and driving to Finland, for example, then of course you can imagine what the service latency would be if all the traffic goes back to Spain, but then being routed back to Finland for say, national service execution in that regard. That doesn't help. So data traffic needs to stay within the visited network. That is what we've achieved here. But also, overall, the KPIs we've managed to achieve are very close to really fulfilling advanced automatic driving on SAA level 4 and 5 in that regard. So we are very close to these requirements. You can still do some optimization, but it is already there. So it can turn into a reality in that regard. Now, the lessons learned from these projects. 5G non-standalone is definitely a significant improvement over 4G, 4G LTE in that regard. But further evolution is already in progress, and that's 5G standalone. That is the full-fledged 5G network with all the capabilities. And they will provide the few still missing key enablers for supporting mission-critical services. And this is not only CAM services, but any other mission-critical service. CAM services on the road, CAM services for the railroad, for example, FRMCS, that is definitely fully enabled with 5G standalone. And that is all about full session and service continuity and end-to-end control of quality and network capabilities. And that's known as network slicing. And that's really important in that regard. Things you cannot fully achieve based on 4G. But that's in a pipeline, and that will be shown soon. And we can certainly also apply some of these improvements also to 4G network. And as I said, 4G is the new baseline across Europe for mobile communications. We can also help addressing it beyond the prioritized 5G deployment areas and corridors. So all three projects produce deployment studies in that regard. So that's valuable. It contains valuable recommendations for any upcoming deployment projects, such as CEF Digital, for example. But more details can be found in a white paper, which is soon to be released. So outlook on the ICT53 projects and beyond. They extend the view beyond road transportation. So it's being extended to other modes of transportation, be it rail or maritime, for example, coastal maritime or inland waterways. And they definitely will benefit from a higher level of maturity of 5G networks in general. But this is still leading edge, sometimes said bleeding edge, with regards to 5G standalone introduction. So challenging in that regard, but pretty confident that they will at least partially address the full thing and take it to the next level. And upcoming projects will look into, say, evolved 5G, beyond 5G, and ultimately 6G for CAM as well, always with the idea of backwards compatibility. And we even have some 5G testbeds around for developing and testing 5G for CAM. They are available, such as Target X. It is also an EU-funded open trial for connected and automated driving project as part of the 6G SNS joint undertaking. And it is accepting applications from SMEs for trials. And if you want to know more about this, there's one gentleman here in the audience, it's Maciek Mühleisen from Ericsson, and he's here to answer any questions related to Target X, which was also important because it is challenging, and that's also some of the lessons learned I did not mention before. It's very challenging to produce reproducible results in an open road environment, especially if it's based on commercial networks in that regard. So test beds definitely fulfill the purpose of having a very controlled environment, even including cross-border capabilities like handing over from one network to the other. That's even possible in such test beds. But what is important is, like with all the research and innovation activities, we are also providing insights which can be used for commercial deployments of 5G for CAM, be it on private investments or by any co-funding schemes like CEF Digital, RRF, or national or any other type of public funding schemes. Now, just to close, if there are any questions, I'm here around all day. You can get in touch with the chairs from 5G for CAM working group. That was formerly under 5G PPPP, the automotive working group, and now it's being called 5G for CAM working group under 6GIA. And I'm here to answer any questions later on. And now I'm handing over.
Thank you very much. So we'll turn now to our second speaker, who is Elena Gennaro, who is the project advisor at the European Health and Digital Executive Agency, to tell us about the outcome of the first Connecting Europe facility digital calls for 5G corridor deployment, and also to tell us about the future.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to explain the results of the first call of 5G corridors within the CEF Digital program, But before doing that, I will briefly explain a bit about the executive agency managing that program, which is HADEA. HADEA is the European Health and Digital Executive Agency established during COVID period in 2021 to help Europe to be more resilient in the post-COVID pandemic by investing more on digital and health sectors. HADEA also covers sectors such as food safety, space, and industry. HADEA manages a total of 25.81 billion euros in different programs for this current programming period, which is 2021-2027. And on CEF Digital, as we can see in the slide, there is 1.6 billion of euros available. There are several topics covered by CEF Digital. So the first one, and important for today, is the 5G coverage along transport corridors. So covering deployment of uninterrupted services enabling connected and automated mobility for safety and non-safety related applications and using 5G pioneer bands. So the deployment of the projects that Edwin explained, so the continuation of those. There is also some allocation of money to a topic covering also 5G deployment. It's called 5G Smart Communities, and it explores the deployment of use cases involving services of general interest and services of general economic interest. CEF Digital covers also backbone connectivity for digital global gateways connecting Europe with other regions in the world. So this is mostly submarine cables. There is also backbone networks for Pan-European Cloud Federation, operational digital platforms, and quantum communication infrastructure. So now let's go to the important topic now, which is the presentation of the result of the first call of the 5G corridors projects funded by CEF Digital. So after years of trials to demonstrate 5G connected and automated mobility provision of services in the European cross-border areas, we're moving from research and innovation a step farther to deployment. This is a big milestone, and it's covered by CEF Digital. Here, in the first call, we have 15 projects funded, and they started this year, January 2023. In the map, the blue projects are the deployment projects, the ones already deploying infrastructure, and the green ones are the study projects. So the study projects have a duration of around 6 months, and the idea is to do the studies, perform the studies for future deployment and submission in Call 3. The Call 3 will be opened in this autumn, Q4 2023. So for these 15 projects, for the first wave of 5G corridors, there is a total investment of 97.7 million euros, of which 46.1 are CEF Digital. And there is, as you see, 12 member states covered by these 15 projects, and the entities and consortium involved include tower companies, MNOs, car manufacturers, toll road company, ICT service companies providing hardware and software infrastructure, and very important as well, railway infrastructure managers and railway undertakings. So what are the projects about? Again, a continuation of what Edwin just explained. So for the 7 deployment projects that are already considered works projects, there are some that are focusing more on deployment of passive infrastructure with active elements, of course, but the idea of this project is to explore new business model based on infrastructure sharing, so what it's called a neutral host model. Some of the projects are designing and testing the cross-border service continuity, so the seamless handover that also Edwin talked about, And the idea of going through deployment for these projects is to test PLS, so public land mobile network handover solutions, first on 4G LTE, then go to 5G non-standalone, and finally aiming at 5G standalone solutions. And more ambitiously, to demonstrate the blueprint, so a solution that will be transferable from the cross-border, where these projects are taking place, to other cross-borders in Europe, so finding a European harmonized way of transfer of technology. And these deployment projects are also rolling out the 5G network and enabling CCAM and future railway mobile communication systems use cases, and also testing network slicing. So this is what the 7 deployment projects are covering until now. And the inception studies, we have some covering mostly rail, some covering mostly road, and one covering inland waterway. So these are the 3 modes of transport covered by CEF Digital. So as I said, these studies projects aim at developing the technical studies for future deployment, and they include the full network planning, CBAs, and of course analysis of regulatory and legal aspects. Now, HADEA will be, or is, and will be gathering from these projects a set of indicators, such as the length of transport corridors covered by 5G, the spectrum bands enabled, the average intersite radio distance, types of service covered, commercial and safety related, data rate and latency per vehicle, and also edge computing facilities. So we have also the support from GUIDE project, so it's the coordination and support action. The consortium members, I think many are here today, are from Eurescom, Logos, I2CAT, and Ertico. So the idea of this project is to support the program by identifying best practices and contributing to the strategic deployment agenda for 5G in Europe. And we hope other questions that are not in these slides, such as what is the demand, what is the existing fleet of CV2X equipped vehicles existing, what is the demand necessary to make this a reality, and other questions such as, for example, what will be the arrangements of the MNOs to enable connectivity of the vehicle and the user, regardless of to which MNO the user is connected to or affiliated to, and many other open questions that still are in the pipeline to really make this a reality. I'm looking forward to the discussion on such a fascinating and interesting topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elena. Going through a lot of detail there. I'm sure some of you will want to grab our speakers in the margin, so please do that during the coffee breaks and the lunch breaks to find out more. We're now going to have a brief panel discussion, so I'm delighted to ask to join me on stage Eduardo Fischmann, the Global Product Strategy and Innovation Director at Cellnex Telecom. Oh, there you are. Thank you very much. Mats Mudjonia Lundbach is the VP Strategic Program at Telia and the CEF Digital 5G Next Coordinator. And Uwe Putschler is the 5GAA Vice Chair and Head of Automotive and Mobility Solutions at Nokia. So, gentlemen, I'm going to go this side for a change. Eduardo, let me start with you. What are the key factors in the identification of the priority sections for 5G corridor deployments?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. I represent Cellnex Telecom, which is one of the major operators of neutral host telecommunications infrastructure in Europe. So from our perspective, we've been seeing the telecommunications industry over the past 20 years really struggling to provide a high-quality coverage across corridors, in particular across cross-border. And in addition to that, some of those challenges have been around duplication of infrastructure, duplication of services, and duplication of technology. So for us, those would help answer your question, which is first of all is making sure that we can identify locations where the coverage is not acceptable for the future use cases. The second one is getting the mobile operators on board, because we all want to stick to the services that we currently have. And the third one will be a strong coordination between member government, European Union, and the local different departments within the member government to ensure that all the regulatory hurdles are being addressed in parallel, so that we don't find ourselves with stranded investments in 2 to 3 years from now.
Matt, it's the same question to you. I mean, there's a lot of different moving parts when we consider about what should be things like demand. Can you hear me? Yes. Demand side, deployment costs, indeed, as you mentioned, the regulatory considerations and cross-border relationships. What for you stands out?
Yeah, for me then, representing Telia, Nordic-Baltic operator, telco operator, we come from a bit different perspective than on having built coverage, etc., several times. We're more coming from the perspective of once we have kind of connected everyone, now it's about connecting everything, and that's kind of a journey that's been ongoing for a bit more than 10 years, I would say, if you talk from moving or mobility type of perspective. And we started 2015, I think. We started our first bigger project in an ecosystem innovation type of environment for moving connective things inside a mine. Where a lot of different players, mining owner, of course, who is the king of the mine, deciding everything in a mine, very controlled environment, but then with a lot of different industry actors in there. After a while, kind of what was done there in that controlled environment, they wanted to take where they kind of take the ore into where they enrich the ore and start to move that around, and then have continuous in their connectivity going out on the road, still very controlled, and into another, would say, confined area. And that has then kind of moved into the next level then of taking it further into public transport. And see, when we work in these confined areas, and we talk a lot about the 5G private networks, that's that's kind of a big drive ongoing, a big implementations ongoing. But then talking public environment, as our 5G infrastructures, or 4G infrastructure for that sake as well, is kind of a multi-tenant network. So it's not only transport and logistics, it's everything that wants to be connected that needs to share that capacity. So we're very happy now when we get out in public environment to have the possibility to get it with the support of the EU funds now to be able to get a bit out of this hen and egg or hen and chicken and egg challenge to do some investments in order to provide this first version of a more industrial connectivity with network slicing, and also to work with these cross-border capabilities to lower the hurdles when crossing borders.
Again, the same question, but also perhaps, as you mentioned, Mats, there is public funding. We heard from our speakers, public funding is available. Does that play a part, or is it other considerations? For Uwe.
Thank you. Good morning. First of all, thank you for being able to represent 5GAA. And for those who don't know 5GAA, 5G Automotive Association was founded in 2016. And the objective was to bring automotive industry and telecoms industry together in a global organization. So we have car manufacturers and their suppliers, telecom operators, their suppliers, and lots of technology suppliers around the world in this organization. And the main focus is to make it happen, or in other words, to work on removing obstacles which prevent us from implementing, deploying connected and automated driving. And this is an evolutionary process, that's clear. And as you can see here on the slide, the focus is about services and solutions which try to help to achieve the main objectives. And this is about linking the road, the vehicles, and the users or pedestrians, bicycle riders, all those traffic participants together. Unfortunately, the PowerPoint didn't work properly here. But today we are talking about infrastructure. And that's why I would like to focus on the lower two boxes, trust and connectivity and flexible architecture. And we have heard today and also yesterday that that trust into the technology is a very important thing if you want to go to automated driving. And trust, not just about security. That's also very clear. Let me give you another example. Trust into location accuracy. Can I trust that a certain pedestrian, which is reported to me, is really at that location? And location accuracy and trust into it, trust implemented with a reasonable amount of effort, because it needs to be also from a business point of view viable. That is one of those examples, and there are others. Edwin talked about another dimension of trust. Can I trust that I don't get interrupted or my connection doesn't get interrupted when I move along or across a border? So another potential part of trust. And we need reliable information about that trust. So that's why our organization has put trust so high on the agenda and this focus. Now, connectivity, obviously we see lots of technologies in this domain. Now we are also focused here on research a little bit going forward. One of the hot topics at the moment is non-terrestrial networks. The discussion has really started about that. That's clear. Now, is it an option for automotive to use those networks? It's one of our topics in the organization at the moment, and here we, again, trust is a topic. Can I trust that or not? And what does it mean to combine terrestrial networks, which we have everywhere today, with non-terrestrial networks? Can we enable ubiquitous coverage with those two types of networks, and also a seamless handover? Again, we are in the trust domain. So maybe let me stop on this as an introduction.
Well, trust obviously requires, as an underpinning, a certain quality of service. So, Eduardo, let's talk about network performance. And what sort of deployment path you think is the best? I mean, should it be a sort of evolutionary based on 4G and then moving up to 5G or the 700 megahertz band and then move up? Or should we be trying to jump straight in with sort of future-proof 5G mid-bands?
I think that the reality is that technology is going to continue on an evolution. So I think there are three main elements, and two of them, or one of them in particular, goes to the point we just discussed, which is the use of a car on the roads is not a best effort. So you need trust, and we refer to a business critical, a mission critical application, and governments have relied on mission critical applications for many years. So we really need to think about connectivity for an autonomous vehicle as being a business critical, not a best effort or a network that you can lose connectivity for a few seconds or have a call dropping and someone is going to call you back. And I think the second element is what we refer in the telecommunications industry as bandwidth, which is the ability to carry the amount of traffic, amount of services required to maintain that quality. And the more cars we introduce on the roads, and the more they rely on the network, the more connectivity they will require, and that will be another critical aspect. So I think one of the cases here on the previous projects with the European Union, where they were doing 4G, they were successful, but as we evolve to 5G, one of the critical aspects is the amount of frequency that we refer to in the industry to carry more traffic, and that's going to continue supporting 5G non-standalone, 5G standalone, probably 6G. And Cellnex is involved with 5G MED, which is one of the projects described earlier. We are now doing 4 of the 7 CEF2 projects that Elena described earlier. And we are ready in another project now in Spain, where we have our own living lab, like a racing car environment for us to test 6G with a few partners.
Mats, bearing in mind this, we were talking a little bit there about bandwidth, but let's talk about how that works and what are the other considerations when we get into cross-border situations, when we talk about alignment principles between member states. How important is that for you?
It's very important, especially if we talk about things that are moving around in the environment. And we believe when it comes to the transport and logistics industry, it will be the telco suppliers like Ericsson, Nokia, etc., together with us as mobile operators driving the technology development. And in combination with the vehicle manufacturers, that also will stand for kind of technology development on the vehicle side. But that will, and the first thing they ask when talking to them is, when will it work across Europe? When will it work globally? The same type of service, because they are global companies, and the same goes for the telco manufacturers. They're also global companies, which we are not. We are very we have a geographical footprint that we're working into. But having said that, I think it's not what will drive this. I mean, it's technology enablers, even if it's 4G or 5G. It's the use cases that we are then going to help in supporting that will be the driver for this. And what we see, transport, and it's the logistics companies having a big part in this. What deficiencies can we find? What type of more sustainable transport chains can we find? And then if you talk about governmental needs, we see a lot around this mission critical type of services where they need some type of trust or guarantee. And we talked then about industrial internet type of connectivity when moving around.
Uwe, give us your perspective on this. You talked a lot about trust. I mean, what from your insight engenders that trust? Is it something like we're talking about the technical specifications? Is it quality of service? Is it the reassurance that's coming from industry sides? What do you think is likely to create this perfect scenario?
Now, it's certainly a combination of different aspects. I mean, let me take automated valet parking. It has been mentioned several times today. That's a good starting point to get into the automated driving type of functionalities, but it relies on connectivity. And obviously the environment is a bit different than an urban road, but many aspects can be verified even in a deployment scenario, step by step. So that's one aspect, a positive experience. The second very important thing is that we really ensure that what we verify in research projects has the potential also to be taken into deployment. And that's a very critical aspect. And let me pick another example, edge computing. The majority says, yeah, edge computing is a very helpful functionality and we will need it eventually. But if you look at the current status, then yes, edge computing is being deployed, but not use cases for the automotive industry. I'm not aware about any commercial deployment of use cases of edge computing in the mobile networks. Also, operators like Deutsche Telekom, Vodafone, Verizon, they are rolling out edge computing in their networks. But we don't have use cases at the moment which are commercially deployed. And that is something which we sometimes forget in those research projects, to understand what it actually means then to take something to a deployment. There are other aspects which need to be considered, and they are challenges. There are challenges to take something to deployment. And I would call that not just a research element of a project, but a business research element of a project. We need to understand whether something we do really has the potential to be taken into a deployment. And in edge computing, we have a few topics the network operators still need to work on to make it deployable in the way we want it and the automotive industry needs it.
Well, thank you. It's very forceful. To stay with this idea of a business case, Eduardo, how important is it to, if you like, matchmake, to join up different organizations together, to get different stakeholders involved from different sides of the border, talking to each other?
The reason why Cellnex is involved in this business is not only to support the introduction of autonomous vehicle. So we see the infrastructure as a shareable asset that can support multiple use cases. If you were to only focus on the three of us at the moment, we've discussed generic telecommunications for an autonomous vehicle, logistics and transportation use cases, or even automotive use cases, but there's a wide range of other use cases. In particular, we are in one of the CEF2 projects, we've partnered, and actually in 5G Med as well, we've partnered with one of the highway operators because we believe that this platform, this infrastructure can help reduce casualties and accidents on the highways as an example. If we were able to reduce 1% of those accidents by communicating to the cars, that alone will pay for the whole infrastructure. We have also the use cases around logistics and transportation, which will rely on the mobile operators, but that alone won't pay for the infrastructure. We have the connected cars as well. So for us, it's critical to address some of the regulatory elements. The first one being that managing or digital infrastructure becomes part of operating a highway, becomes part of operating traffic. Today, it's not considered an operational element. There are other considerations around the cross-border, as we just discussed, as well as how the mobile operators all come to the table. And most importantly, is facilitating this orchestration of standards and business models across Europe. So I do welcome the opportunity to work with Telia and Deutsche Telekom and others which are in investing in this space, so that we all coordinate and make sure that a car leaving from Portugal in one of our corridors will cross to France and then eventually to Germany and get to the Baltics and Scandinavia and operate smoothly in one platform without requiring multiple hardware devices, multiple protocols, and just adding cost and complexity to that ecosystem.
Well, Mats, to build on that, I mean, what is the role then of, I mean, you mentioned regulation, but Mats, what is the role of national and local public authorities in this? I mean, we've talked a lot about the EU level, but where do you see the sort of more granular level?
I think, of course, we strive for a kind of highest level of standard. Best would be there's a global standard to start with. But I think in order to find that one, we need to work close with our customers to fulfill their demands. And based on that, we'll make some learnings that we will then start to implement. And then, so I think the learning will grow from local regulators, etc., on specific requirements. Specifically, if we talk about, for example, around Rome, we have the road and traffic authorities. Are they going to start to, they need to start to learn as well, based on our learning, on what will be the future regulation. We will learn from them and their requirements. So I think that would be, it somehow, it will be communicating bodies that will then be lifted to a global or European level.
Uwe, let me ask you about more specific questions. What is the target handover or interrupt time between two mobile networks, be they on different sides of a border, or two different networks? I mean, I guess a target would be 0, but I mean, what's realistic and what would best meet the needs for connected and automated driving?
Let me start with some work has been done, and Edwin reported about the projects which have really verified some principles how to implement that. And we have, as 5GA, we have also published a few papers on how to achieve a reduction of that handover time. Well described how to get to 1 second, maybe with other approaches also to 100 milliseconds. So that is today in a reasonable way possible. Now, is that then sufficient for the highest levels of automated driving the automotive industry envisages today? I think it remains to be seen. So let's not put a number on the table today. Let's go step by step. We will see a huge improvement if the new projects implement that at the corridors. We will also see whether this is really then possible to really generalize it, not just for the corridors, but in general for the networks. And then with the new technology coming step by step on board, we will see further improvements. And that's why I wouldn't like to really put now a number of 5 milliseconds or 10 milliseconds. That's fairly artificial at the moment. Let's do it step by step, and we have some good basis to get substantial improvements.
Eduardo, another sort of specific question here for you, because I'm trying to draw you out a little bit, about the ensuring connectivity to all vehicles independently of their affiliation to a mobile network. I suppose I'm asking you here to talk about this neutral host model that you're fostering. Tell me a bit about that.
The neutral host model is an evolution of what started as a shareable tower company. So Cellnex operates 130,000 towers in Europe, or it's in the process of, I think the moment is around 110,000, and many of them will have more than one operator. So the evolution of that model is that in areas, and why is that happening is because it's just not economical to have two towers, one next to the other. Now when you start thinking about highways and you start thinking about locations where there is not enough people living around, and the economics of building a tower alone, it's quite challenging. The notion of neutral host is where, there are two elements there. The first one is that the whole tower becomes shareable. So 2 operators, 3 operators, or in some cases 4, could rely in one tower, one radio to provide service to all vehicles, some of them being in different networks. As we start moving beyond that point is about the roaming aspect. So we've been trying to deploy in 5G MED 2 edge computing instances, one in each side of the border, to make sure that we can bring down from 100 milliseconds. But most importantly is that infrastructure will be shareable, would be neutral, and the 3 operators from one country and the 3 operators of the other country, at times 6 or 7 or 8 of them, they could actually leverage that infrastructure in a much lower cost base, offer the service levels, the mission critical, the business critical service levels that the cars will require. But in order for us to accomplish that, MNOs or mobile operators, they need to want to do that, because they are not forced. They shouldn't be forced, but there should be some incentives for them to participate and allow that sort of lower cost base to benefit the community, the users, as well as the operators.
Well, for a final round of questions to all of you, I want to just pull back a bit and talk about the mobility ecosystem. So less specific, but my question was which industry should be involved: telecom operators, tower companies, telecom vendors, road operators, manufacturers, vehicle manufacturers, IT integrators. There's many different people that need to be involved to create an ecosystem. So rather than asking you just to tell me who you think or to list who should be involved, tell me where you think there might be a lack at the moment. Where is a particular stakeholder that your voice isn't loud enough in the mix, or that you think could be louder? Where do you see room for improvement, shall we say, to move forward? Mats, I'll ask you to answer first.
Yeah, it's a difficult question, because I think everyone is involved in the discussion, discussing about what to do and having opinions on what to do. I think the key challenge is really who is taking lead on what, because there are risks for disruptive solutions that come up that might disrupt us, that might disrupt others. There are room for new business opportunities for everyone, and also new ways of doing stuff. So from that perspective, I think no one is missing. But what I think is, and then coming back again to the possibility that we have now with the EU grants, is that we have the possibility to take a step forward and say we can do this without having to start the discussion with what's the business case for it, how much will you get paid, etc. We can start to try out and prove the values instead, together with other players.
Uwe, what are your thoughts? Is there some key lever that we could pull to make the ecosystem develop faster, better, or more securely?
I believe there is a much stronger cooperation and interaction between the automotive industry and the road operation industry required. to me, is an essential element of the ecosystem. And if you look at the existing organizations, in one organization you have more this side, and in the other organization more the other side. But this very intensive exchange is missing. And the second element, which is probably or has to be developed more intensively, is all sorts of service providers, which we will see in this domain. The number will grow, but some key players, I think, we need to involve also more intensively.
Who are
These are the two.
I mean, who are those key players, though? Do you want to name? Are they from specific sectors, or are they just specific types of organization?
No, we see some of the obvious ones are like here, TomTom, in Wix, etc. But there are new names as well. Yeah, also from the IT industry, moving into that segment.
I would say that they are all involved, but a stronger orchestration between the EU policies and the local members would be one. I think the second one would be, Ulf mentioned that the economics of those use cases, commercialization of use cases, is a challenge. So commercial operators, they struggle to justify jumping into the party without a clear regulatory framework. So the operators, as an example, the willingness to join, it's difficult because they have their priorities. And the third one will be the whole O&M ecosystem. So in that case, we a couple of months ago, the Spanish government has invested or have funded, and Cellnex is now building with a few other partners a network of laboratories for the O&Ms to come in and test the cars and develop their cars so that they can develop the trust that we discussed earlier. We already have our Castellolí testing center in Barcelona, but we are now hoping to deploy another two at least in the foreseeable future, already committed, another one in Barcelona and one in Galicia, to allow the O&Ms to have an environment, at least in Spain. Hopefully we can extend those laboratories, those testing labs to other countries within the UN, so that the whole ecosystem can develop the trust that is required for the cars to start at least connecting to the network and getting a feel in real case what it's like before we can transition to an effective AV ecosystem.
I think I would like to underline that to come to sustainable business and cooperation models between public authorities and road operators, or in many cases public authorities, and the private industry. That is one of the challenges we face as well. And to get to those business relationships and cooperation principles, that is something we need to work together on. That is an ecosystem play, absolutely clear.
Mats, did you want to add a final word?
I think I agree with everything what's been said, so pause there.
Fantastic. We have consensus, which is always nice. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. I think at this juncture, I'll invite Christian back onto the stage. He's been busily taking notes to try and find a red thread, but I'll let you wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I would like to thank, on behalf of the EUCAD organizing committee, the 5 speakers and our moderator, for this very stimulating and fruitful discussion. We are just at the beginning of a long journey in the deployment of digital connectivity infrastructure throughout Europe. In order to frame and stimulate this process, the Commission has set up, as part of the Digital Decade Policy Programme, a multi-country project for 5G corridor deployment, coordinated by the Smart Networks and Services Joint Undertaking, or SNSJU, that is also in charge of R&I activities in the field of 6G, with involvement of the member states as part of the state representative group. This multi-country project will rely on the drafting of a 5G strategic deployment agenda for connected and automated mobility, based on the input from the stakeholders, and with the view to provide guidance and enable sharing of best practices, but also regarding the deployment scenarios or the cooperation models we just talked about, with the support of the GUIDE project that is funded under SAFE Digital. So the views and positions expressed today will contribute to nurture this process and move forward. So many thanks again to all of you.
Thank you very much. And a round of applause for our speakers, please.